Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Anderson. I am the Housing Outreach Coordinator with the Kentucky Equal Justice Center, and I am here today to talk a little bit about emergency rental assistance, eviction court, and general sort of tenant protections. I'm very happy to be with you today. Let me share my screen with you real quick. I hope this works. The first time I did it. Okay, I'm sharing it. And then here is the slideshow. Okay. So, what is KEJC? I'll just tell you a little bit about the Kentucky Equal Justice Center. Um, Basically, we are very devoted to making sure all Kentuckians have equal justice. We're very focused on making sure low-income Kentuckians are supported and have access to the things that they need. And that's a baseline. We historically worked with and supported legal aids, and we still do that a lot and have a close working relationship with them, but we don't have some of the restrictions that they have with their funding. So we are able to file class action lawsuits. We can represent undocumented clients, do like lobbying and advocacy and targeted outreach and stuff like that. So we work in a variety of areas, healthcare. We have a really great connector on staff and have done some really pretty successful lawsuits in that field. We do food access, SNAP advocacy, workers' rights, and help with workers' comp and stuff like that. Not We don't help with work. We do workers' rights stuff and housing stuff. Well, there's another talk from KJC that I would recommend on health coverage and food benefits in Kentucky. Miranda Brown and Tyler Offerman did that presentation, and they are so knowledgeable and have a lot of really good information. So I would highly recommend that. And then another part of KJC is Maxwell Street Legal Clinic, which is a immigration clinic that offers a broad range of low-cost legal services for low-income immigrants and refugees. And they are actually taking new applicants right now in June of 2022, in case you watch this later. And I'll have their number at the end of the slide. My job at KJC as the housing outreach worker, I'll just tell you a little bit about that. So I make sure that everybody who has an eviction court date knows about the rental assistance program in Lexington right now, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I also do some application assistance as well. So legal aid has a rent assist office, but they can't represent everybody. So if you are undocumented, if you are in some way unable to be represented by legal aid, I can help you with your application process. I'm also at the Waypoint Center on Thursdays. So that's another way to find me. I do assistance there, and you would just need to contact Miss Jerry over there and make an appointment for yourself. So that's a little bit of what I do. So I'm going to start off by talking about what eviction court looks like right now in Lexington, in case that's something you have to face. And a lot of people are having to face eviction court for the first time because of COVID and sort of how things are right now with the rent increases and stuff. So before court, your landlord needs to give you a 7-day notice or a 30-day notice to pay or to remedy a non-compliance situation based on your lease and what's happening is the different days there. But usually if it's a non-payment of rent, it's the 7-day notice to pay. And that gives you a certain amount of time to pay them the rent. And if not, then they can move on with the legal process. And so if that happens, the next communication you'll receive is is a court document, a forcible detainer warrant, and usually the constable will post it on your door, and it has your court date and where you need to go and that kind of thing. Those are not translated in Spanish often, or any other language. I've only ever seen them in English, so that's a barrier. And if you have questions about that paper when you get it, definitely can reach out to me. Court is 5 days a week. It's at 9:30 in courtroom 5. on the third floor of the district courthouse, which if you're looking at the courthouses, it's the one on the left. So there's two buildings and there's a road in between that separates them. It's the left-hand side. Again, it's on the third floor. We tell people, do not miss your court date. If you don't go to your court date in eviction court, you're automatically evicted because there's nobody to tell your side of the story. And so that's just what happens. And people don't, it is frustrating to show up for eviction court and feel like you don't have, you don't feel like you're level with the landlord or whatever, but definitely go. If you pay and your landlord tells you don't have to go, which sometimes happens, I still tell people to get it in writing, just so you have proof that happened. It depends on, how, what your trust with your landlord is and stuff like that. But I generally tell people to get it in writing. When you're in eviction court, I will start with that. I'm not a lawyer and I can't give legal advice. So, if that's an option, I tell people to reach out to legal aid first for representation. And it usually helps you get a better outcome to have an attorney with you. And so you would call the intake line, and I'll provide that number at the end. And they actually have an attorney that helps with intakes that can sort of initially assess your situation and then, if needed, refer you to a housing attorney. If that's something that you don't want to access, that's fine, or you can't. You do have the right to speak on your own behalf in eviction court. And some judges, there's 5 judges, and they all run their courtroom differently. Some judges aren't as good at making space for tenants to talk on their and speak about the situation. So it can be really hard, especially in a formal setting like that. But I just keep in mind that is your right. You can speak. You also have the right to have an interpreter in court. So even if you speak some English and you can kind of understand what's going on, if English is not your first language, you have the right to have representation for the language you're most comfortable with. So if they call your name and there's not somebody interpreting for the language that you speak, you can say, I request an interpreter. And if they don't have one available in the courthouse that day, they have to continue the case, and you all will come back at a later date. And sometimes that actually gives people more time to figure out what's going on. So it can be helpful just for that. Right now, because of COVID, this is not always the case, but because of COVID and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which I'll get to next, there is actually a rent assist representative in the courtroom with a laptop, and they can look up everybody who's applied for the program and give an update to the judge, and that happens a lot. So even if you get down to the wire and you have an eviction court date, in a couple of days, I tell people to try to fill out as much of the application as they can, even if they don't have time to finish it or to get an appointment to finish it, just so that there's something up there. And it's better than having, it's a 12-step process and is pretty complicated. So just as much as you can do is always better than none. Also, I'll mention that depending on what happens in court, there is also a community action representative and another legal aid representative outside the courthouse room. And there's a couple of rooms right outside. And so you might end up needing to access them for a variety of reasons. So the rental assistance program, Lexington received a really incredible amount of funding from the federal government for COVID-19 emergency rental assistance. And Lexington created the Housing Stabilization Program to distribute it. We can pay 12 months back rent, 3 months future rent, and utilities. There's a couple of limitations for the program that are important. The first one is that the landlord has to agree to accept the funding from the program to pay back rent. So if you're trying to get back rent covered, in most cases, the landlord has to agree to accept it, and then we can proceed with that. If the landlord says no, they will not accept the funding. It's their choice. Unfortunately, they the program can still help you. There is relocation assistance, so that helps you move to a new place. So they would help you they would help you pay deposit and a couple, maybe 3 months of rent. And they can also help you pay back utilities. So if you owe utilities and it's keeping you from getting something in your name, they can pay that as well. If you do get evicted, there is also a portion of the program that will help you be in a hotel for a month to give you more time to find a place to move. Not all properties will take the relocation assistance either, so sometimes it can be a little hard to find a place. So the hotel voucher gives you a little more time. The funds are still open. The application portal is still open. We're still distributing funds. It's hard to know how much longer the program will run. Some people, say at least the end of this year. Some people say longer than that. So it's hard to tell. But for now, June 2020, it's open and taking applications. The program is run by Community Action and is supported by Legal Aid, the Rent Assist Office, and then KJC and other community organizations. And sometimes that can be a little confusing. So Community Action actually distributes the funds, but other organizations help people apply and sort of do some support work to help it run more smoothly. One more thing. I wanted to talk about applying if you are undocumented and like worries, like public charge worries and stuff like that. So I have had clients that are undocumented get paid from the program. I know it can be scary, and they've told us that it doesn't, that it's not a concern, and that it wouldn't impact the your like any citizenship routes that you would want to take or anything like that. It's like, I know that there's a lot of distrust about that, and if you're concerned about that, we can talk about it in more detail before you choose to apply or not. To qualify for the program, there's just a couple of things. Sorry, I took some of these from a presentation I gave in Spanish, so some of them are in Spanish. So there needs to be some sort of impact from COVID, something like you couldn't work, you got COVID, your children were in NTI or couldn't go to daycare because of the lockdown. You had a reduced hours because there's a part shortage. There's somebody that's really high risk for COVID in your house and you didn't want to expose them by going to work. That happens a lot. Most people qualify for this. So even if you feel like you haven't been impacted by COVID, we can usually figure out a way that it has impacted your income. For example, I had a client that was on Social Security, fixed income, didn't lose their job, never got COVID, but because of the fixed income, all of the price increases and problems with that impacted their ability to pay rent. And then they also were trying to support their niece who lost their job. So we managed to figure out a way that COVID had impacted their income. So I always tell people that don't let that stop you. In very few cases have people not been impacted. And then there's an income requirement that's pretty good or high for these kind of programs. So for example, if there's two people in the house, you need to make less than $50,800. If there's one person in the house, it needs to be less than $44,450. So most people qualify. And then the last one is that you live in Fayette County. There is this sort of assistance available if you're out of the county. And it's a different portal and program and application process. And if you have questions about that, I can direct you to the right place. But this program is just Lexington specific. And they've done a good job. If you're going to apply, there's some things to think about. Applications move faster when you have an eviction court date. So they're really trying to prioritize making sure that people who are about to lose their homes get processed first. So those can happen in about 2 weeks if everything goes right. They take longer if you don't And there's some terms that protect you. There is a term that says the landlord can, that now says the landlord can set up a separate agreement with you to pay late fees. Not a lot. Some landlords waive those. Some landlords want to collect them. So that might be something that you'll have to figure out as well. We can't cover the late fees, just the rent and the utilities. You can apply online. It's this is a link. It is a 12-step application, and there's a lot of uploading. And so if you don't have internet access, or it's hard for you to use technology or something like that, there's really good options for assistance. So the Rent Assist office at Legal Aid just created this office just for helping people apply for the rental assistance program. They're really great. I am a big fan. Their number is 859-813-5533. And if for some reason you don't qualify for legal aid services, if you're undocumented, conflict of interest case, something like that, I can help fill in that gap. So if you want help with applications, if they tell you that you don't qualify, I would be the person to come to. And my number is 502-839-4. Nope, it's 502-604-0713. That is incorrect, but it'll be on the last slide as well. Sorry about that. And if you do choose to apply online, and it would be helpful for the application to be translated, this is the little translate button. It's hard to find, so I wanted to highlight it. And if you click that before you sign in, the whole application will be in the language that you choose. The final piece of this that I wanted to talk about is a little bit about like tenant protections and how to protect yourself as a tenant in Lexington. It'll be very general, but the first thing I wanted to talk about is Lexington is a URALTA city, which is the Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. And it was sort of passed as a way to standardize or the interactions between landlords and tenants, and it like provides protections on both sides. It's very complicated and long, and I definitely don't know everything about it. So I just, wanted to highlight a couple of things. Yes. The thing that I'm most interested in with it, and something to consider, is sorry about that. I had a bit of a technical difficulty. So there is a pathway to try to remedy that situation, and it can involve withholding rent in like an escrow account, and it's hard to, so I would try to get help with that. But the reason I bring it up is because I have worked with several tenants that have tried to advocate for themselves by withholding rent, because why would you pay rent if you got a toe fungus from your bathroom and there's sewage in the drain and their window's broken, and the landlord won't fix it. So it makes sense that you wouldn't want to pay rent in that situation. And I just wanted to say that it didn't work out for the tenant because of the they just withheld the rent and then they got evicted for non-payment of rent. So I just wanted to mention that as something to keep in mind. You should definitely take action to remedy that if you can, but it can be a little complicated. The second thing I would say is document communication with your landlord. If possible, communicate by text or email. And this can be really important later if something goes wrong or something. So document communication with your landlord. If possible, communicate by text or email. I've seen this be really important. And, you know, a friend of mine, her landlord would always call her, and she actually requested that they do text and had to push back on him a little bit, but it ended up being important for her to have done that. Another thing is like keep your pay stubs and records of receipt and other records. Especially if you're renting from like a large apartment building or a company that has a bunch of properties across the nation and they use sort of like an online system, those systems mess up a lot. And so a client that I had was so good about keeping her pay stubs. And she spoke Spanish mostly, and she kept going to the office to try to advocate for herself. Like, I have paid May. Why are you charging me May? And they wouldn't, they wouldn't fix it. They said they couldn't fix it. And she had proof, so she was able to get that fixed. And otherwise she would have been charged double rent. And then another situation is like, try to keep up on signing your leases and stuff. So, especially with the situation in Lexington right now, housing prices are so high, and there's been a lot of property transfers. I've seen at the housing apartment complexes a lot too. For example, like Pegasus Place is now Riverview of the Bluegrass or something. And usually when properties change hands, the rent, they raise the rent too. And so if you haven't, if the lease isn't signed from the previous property manager, then they can try to raise the rent on you too. So that's happening to someone I'm working with. She had signed it electronically and didn't have a record of that. And the offices, they don't have a record of it either. And they're trying to raise her rent like $250. So leases, read the lease and make sure you're okay with it. And then make sure that you stay up to date on signing it so that they can't raise the rent out of nowhere. I also always take photos when you move in, and you all probably know a lot of this stuff, but I like to go over it anyways. Whenever I move in, I take photos. So then when you move out, they, try to charge you for damage that was there when you moved in. You have proof of that. And then this is one of my favorites, and it's just good to do anyways, but it's talk to your neighbors. So especially if you're having a problem, if you have sewer coming up in your drain and they won't fix it, if 10 other tenants have sewer coming up in the drain and you all go together to try to get that fixed, it's a lot harder to ignore. And it's a lot harder for them to, it protects you too. So talk to your neighbors and stay up to date with each other. And then with housing issues, like there is a role for nonprofits, like the Housing Stabilization Program. They have helped so many people pay their rent, and it's been really great to be a part of. But there's also a part of housing that, like, it's like the people that are renting, we need to have a say in all of that. So there are some really great groups right now working to change the world for renters in Lexington right now. And I just wanted to point out a couple of them to you. If you're frustrated with all of the things that you have to go through as a renter, or you have ideas about how things could be better and that you would like to see happen, there's some groups right now that are really working hard on that. And, housing is getting to be really hard in Lexington. It's hard to be a renter right now. So There is the Kentucky Tenants. They are having an event soon. It's a town hall that's bringing a lot of renters together to talk and collaborate and come out with a goal to and something to focus on as a group. The town hall is on June 22nd at 6 p.m. at the Lyric Theater. If you see this recording after that has happened, they have a Facebook page, and we'll keep having events and things to plug into. And then the Tenants Union, the Lexington Tenants Union, has been doing some advocating for people who have non-renewal of lease situations. So that's when the landlord chooses not to renew the lease. The tenant has no say in it, and they just have to move. So that's been happening a lot in Lexington as well. And then LPD Accountability is a group that's focused on is thinking a lot about other ways for there to be ownership in housing and renting. So community ownership, housing cooperatives, some alternative ideas from the simple rent from somebody who owns it, or rent from a company who owns it, sort of rent, trying to have a collective housing ownership system. And they're really active on Facebook as well. I just wanted to give you a couple of those other options that aren't just, that could maybe create some long-term solutions in Lexington. And so my last slide. So this is just a little resource slide. The first link is kyjustice.org, and they recently released this website, and there's a couple of pages that sort of generally go over legal issues. One of them is housing, and sort of give you a baseline of knowledge to start at and answer a couple of common questions. ky-justice.org, that's our website. It can connect you to a variety of our services, and also has some really good blog posts, especially about housing during COVID and stuff like that. My number is 502-604-0713. If you have questions about housing or applying for rental assistance or anything like that, that is the best thing to do. The legal aid intake line is 859-431-8200. Legal aid rent assist team, that's specifically if you want to apply for help, if you want help applying for rental assistance, 859-813-5533. And then the Maxwell Street Legal Clinic is taking new cases right now in June 2022, and their number is 859-233-3840. Okay. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time today. Please, if you ever have questions about housing or tenants or eviction court or anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm working on being a Spanish speaker, and you can usually do pretty well, and we can always use Language Light. And have a wonderful day.